you give us some figures on that, like where you started and now, like what numbers you're looking at in terms of audience?
Yeah, so I'm up to about 3,000 listeners now, which to some people is like, that's not much. But for me, I thought I'd be maybe in the 10 to 20 range of people that are really close to me, and maybe my mom would tune in and listen to each of the episodes too. But
which hopefully she still does.
I think so.
So hey everybody, this is Russ Vaagen. I'm here at the Bend and Sway Studios in Spokane. We're here for the Bend and Sway Show to tell stories about people in and around Spokane doing awesome stuff. And here today we have James Krejci. James is a banker and a podcaster, among other things. He's got some actually history in metalwork, fabrication, and manufacturing from a family background. And I had the opportunity to be on James' podcast, Irons in the Fire, and that was a lot of fun. And you've newly joined a new bank, and so we got some things to talk about today.
Definitely. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. So, James, why don't you give us a little bit of a feel of who you are, where you came from, and then what are you doing in Spokane, and then let's move into Irons in the Fire.
Yeah, so I think I'd be crazy if I didn't introduce myself by first saying that I'm a father, because I've got 4 children at home and a lovely wife, Annie, and we've been married for going on 8 years now. So a father and a husband, and so that keeps me busy with a lot. And then commercial banker, and I, like you mentioned, I just started at First Interstate Bank right across the street. And it's my first week over there, so there's a lot going on. And then as far as kind of what has kept me more engaged in my career are hobbies that sort of play into my career, or play on the sidelines of my career as a commercial banker, and that being the podcast, and that's plural now. So I started out working with you on Irons in the Fire, and that being a manufacturing and an aerospace podcast. And then this year I'm launching a second podcast just on general leadership topics. So some people around town like, servant leadership and different topics, and so we kind of dive into that. And
well, we kind of knew we were running in a lot of the same circles. And
exactly.
So it's kind of a cross-promotional thing. Let's get out there and tell the story of what's going on around Spokane. Because for those of us that are out there doing business, there's a lot going on. A lot of cool things going on, and we don't always do a good job of telling these stories. And so for me, this whole show is about allowing people, in their own words, to tell their story, and maybe even give a glimpse into the story of some of the others they've worked with. So people that aren't in Spokane, or just maybe arriving, or may have been here their whole lives and don't know what's going on a mile down the road, get a chance to do that. So I really applaud you for your efforts going out there and doing it. And it's kind of funny, you get going on this and people forget that you had to start someplace.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, and I just feel fortunate enough to help you start your first podcast. And I think what we're doing here will be a lot of fun, and it'll give people that opportunity.
Definitely. And you're getting me back because now I'm in the hot seat.
Yeah, so exactly. So you knew that might come back to you. So why don't you talk a little bit about the success of Irons in the Fire, why you did that, maybe give us a couple of cool stories from that really stand out in your mind of those efforts out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been quite a bit more successful than I imagined. The reason I started it was I wanted to, kind of like you're doing with this, is I wanted the great manufacturers and aerospace companies here in Spokane to be able to take the time to share their story without kind of figuring out the logistics of how to do that, and start the community hearing those stories and thinking about how they could collaborate and help the different businesses and them coming together and helping each other. And so my interest in manufacturing, to back up from that, is that my father was in metal fabrication and did a lot of creative art with metalwork and welding, etc. And so as a kid, I was in the shop and I was sweeping floors and seeing him do all these cool things. So that's kind of part of my makeup. It's part of my blood. And so thinking about a hobby that kind of ties into commercial banking as well, I was like, man, I'm passionate about manufacturing and I'm passionate about Spokane and helping businesses. How can this all package together? So, and then I started out, recording with one mic on a little laptop or tablet, thinking, my friends might tune into this and a few people might listen. And the numbers of listeners, kept going up with each episode.
Can you give us some figures on that, like where you started and now, like what numbers you're looking at in terms of audience?
Yeah, so I'm up to about 3,000 listeners now, which to some people is like, that's not much. But for me, I thought I'd be maybe in the 10 to 20 range of people that are really close to me, and maybe my mom would tune in and listen to each of the episodes too. But
which hopefully she still does.
I think so. So, and it's beyond even the United States. So a lot from Canada, a lot from the UK, and it's been cool to be able to pinpoint where people are tuning in from and see those trends. And then just the other day, I decided to hop in and look at the metrics. I don't all the time, but the episodes, each of them popped by like 500 in a week. And so there's this small region in California that somehow started tuning into the show and made each one of those kind of pop. So that's cool. I don't know where that came from or what that's about, but I think people are getting excited about what's happening in Spokane, and some large group decided to tune into this. So
yeah, I think we tend to think of social networks being like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, but the social network kind of goes beyond that sometimes. And I find like I reached out and talked to a guy that's in the mass timber field out of Brazil, and all of a sudden I've got all these people that are following me on different posts from Brazil and from South America, and it has to be from that one interaction.
Yeah.
And so you never know when you tap into somebody. It might be somebody that was from Spokane that lives in that area and says, hey, start telling people, they find interest, and away it goes. So it's pretty fascinating. And I think the stories you're telling are compelling. I've listened to most of the shows. That's the beauty of podcasts, is we can just go get that show and listen to it again, or maybe people need to get out there and listen to it for the first time, but it's always captured there and archived there.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that, and that's the same thing with capturing video and all these things. And I think people tend to underestimate the power of just putting your voice out there and putting some content out there. The worst thing that can happen is nobody watches. I guess maybe somebody could say something negative about you and that bothers you, but to me, I think that being able to get out there and share the things that you're doing, it's also educational for us. I mean, wouldn't you say? Like, you've learned a lot about what it takes to be a podcaster since, from what you thought going in.
Absolutely.
And I think that feedback you get from others is important. Not only that, but it feels pretty good too sometimes.
It does. And then another even bigger success to me is that we've had several opportunities, and you've been part of a couple of them, where the Irons in the Fire guests have had a chance to get together in a group. And you might have somebody who's manufacturing widgets talking to somebody who's building robots, or like you working with CLT and other wood products, and the three of you are talking, and there's solutions that are flushed out that may have never,
things you may not even know. Like, for instance, I reached out to Michael Sensky after we got together at the function in the Spokane Valley. We had our team go out there, and they're gonna come visit us, and we've actually figured out maybe there's some solutions in robotics that they know about that we don't. So that's a good example of that, how people are getting together and talking and doing things. So I think you get out there, you won't even know the lives you touched, because that's the way it works.
I like that.
Yeah. So as we go forward here, why don't you talk a little bit about banking and how that translates into your relationships with all these other folks. And were they from the bank and from the relationships at the bank, or were they people that you just reached out to that you were interested in, or a combination of both?
Yeah, so it's a combination of both. I think for starters, I kind of reached out to people that I was comfortable with, maybe several people that I had already worked with through the banking career. Mm-hmm. And from there, once I got comfortable with the flow of the podcast and how to structure the podcast, I started just looking around Spokane and thinking who would be interested in sharing their story, and who would also have a story that's awesome to tell. And so I've started just reaching out to the companies that I want to bring on the show. And then from there, it's, I've had a few people actually reach out to me and say, would you have time to swing down and help me tell my story? So
that's awesome.
It's grown from there.
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Merrick Condon.
Yeah.
You asked me to do an introduction there, and I didn't know what he was going to do with it, but he's a big part of why the kind of energy around doing the things like Irons in the Fire, the Ben and Sway show, are happening, because I think he's brought a revived energy to the city, and he helped kick off your podcast, I think, with your first show. Yeah. And which I thought was great, because he highlighted a lot of the companies and the ideas and really the thoughts that are leading people down that path. And one of the things I was just talking about him today is that he's a Republican mayor in a city that's really a city amongst rural communities, mm-hmm. and yet he's a leader in sustainability. And so Spokane is this manufacturing, agriculture, but also on the hub of doing some amazing things within the city and thinking about it in a sustainable way. Yeah. And I think that's what makes Spokane and the Inland Northwest unique. Don't you agree? Like there's a consciousness about not only doing this to make a profit, which we all need to do because that's part of the financial sustainability. Right. But people really care about their community, and then acting local and thinking global around here. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. And then when you were saying that, I thought, it's unique that you find a community with such deep roots, but that is also willing to be nimble and evolve in things like technology and integrating that into the manufacturing space that's been around for a long time in this community. So pretty unique mix.
That brings me to a question. So you've done some interviews with some people, and I've been enlightened to some of the things that are going on around Spokane. Could you give us one or two things that, as a result of you going out and looking at manufacturing and talking to these manufacturers, that really just blew your socks off? Like, I had no idea they were doing this, and this kind of thing was actually happening here.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of examples. We talked a little bit about Pearson Packaging and Michael Sensky. I knew it existed, but when I walked through the factory and you're seeing a group of guys huddled around an assembly line situation, and there's robotic arms that are being programmed to time their grab of a product and put it into a box, and you're kind of seeing the robot make a couple of misses, and then it's learning on its own. And so then maybe the third time it dials it in perfectly, and then it goes. And it's like learning on its own, and nobody's typing in a different code, and that's just like mind-blowing to me. And then the second is Scanavalve out in Liberty Lake, and they're making these little, I'm going to butcher the technical terms here, but it's little pressure sensors for wind tunnel testing, for testing F1 racers, to make sure they don't have too much lift off of the track, that they stay on the track. And those pressure sensors are distributed worldwide. Yeah. And it blows you away how intricate the holes that are drilled in there, how small they are, how intricate the designs of these things are, and how cool it is that Liberty Lake would be producing something that's like a world leader in that space.
Well, when we visited Pearson Packaging, when you walk upstairs into their offices, did you get to feel like you could be in any Silicon Valley startup
Oh,
or
yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that? I mean, it was just well done, and you could tell all these really smart people working on lots of things, and it didn't feel like you were in Airway Heights.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think all that's really interesting, and you know, there's some new companies coming to Spokane. There's big Amazon investment going on up at the airport. It seems like everywhere you turn around, there's something happening, and
Right.
and this space that we're in at 518 West Riverside, there's I think 5 or 6 startup businesses in here, so it's fun to be around. And also we've got Indaba Coffee downstairs, so we can stay wired up.
My favorite coffee spot.
Yeah, it is great. So it's great to be part of this community, and I'm excited about what we're doing here at Bend and Swave, also up at Vaagen Timbers, and then just to touch and help other businesses. I mean, that's really why we're wanting to do this, because as you know, there's so many cool things out there, and people need to get out there and tell the story. And not everybody has either the initiative or able to, maybe they're even camera shy, to get out there and tell their story. So I think having people out there that really want to do that and help them do that is beneficial for everybody, really, because you never know when that relationship is going to be connected, and you know, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. It can be very synchronous and go beyond that. So I'd just like to say thanks for stopping by. Thanks for being part of the show. I think it's exciting.
My pleasure.
I'd like to wish you the greatest success at your new job at First Interstate. I think that's
Thanks,
cool.
Russ. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add before we break free here?
Actually, you know what? So something did pop into my head. I don't know why I stumbled on this, but I have been pretty interested in the West Plains development out there. And so I went back 3 years and looked at some articles that were produced by the Journal of Business. And they were talking about how they were going to develop the West Plains area. And they said, here's the plan. We want to do X and then Y, and then it's going to bring Z. And I was like blown away, because it's exactly what's playing out there. Is they've brought, you know, a big anchor in like Amazon, and then there's a couple of manufacturers from the west side who have built around that and are planning to build around that. And then there's newer kind of startups from Silicon Valley, like the Mullen Technologies electric car maker, coming in, and that was the Z. And I was just like, wow, they just predicted the future.
Ironically, we're having meetings with the West Plains folks to talk about potentially building the factory that could house Mullen Technologies, because the stuff we're doing in Colville with Vaagen Timbers, these eco-friendly, cool mass timber products, and it would really speak to an eco-friendly electric car manufacturer. So anyway, it's fun stuff, and all that stuff is happening, and that is really cool when you go back and you go, there was a plan that was put in place, and it's being executed.
Exactly.
And
pretty unique.
We can't make it exactly as the plan, but that's actually helpful, because sometimes it's better because we don't have all that information. Nobody would have ever said, hey, an electric 2-seat sports car is going to be produced in Spokane, Washington. I mean, people would go, what? No, why?
Yeah.
You don't try to make it happen. You try to set the table and let it happen, and that's what's happened with that.
Well, and you'll be soon supplying the CLT for a lot of the plants that are built out there.
I hope so. Yeah, I think so. We really
exciting.
We really look at this as an opportunity to support the businesses here, and we think that this area of the world could be, for North America anyway, the mass timber capital of the region and the continent. So that's really exciting for us. You know, I gave you this piece of advice when you first started your podcast, so I need to do it now, and that is, how can everybody get a hold of you, and what are you working on right now, and where can people follow you?
So I think the best way to reach out to me is probably through LinkedIn. It's a platform I use for pretty much everything connecting to me professionally and personally. And then most of the work I'm doing with the podcasts, I'm marketing that on LinkedIn as well. So
awesome.
Go out and start a connection. Feel free to reach out and connect to me that way. And it's amazing to be able to take that and then people that need connections elsewhere, like if they want a connection to you or another company, I'm able to do that because of the community that I'm in. So
well, great, James. It's been a pleasure having you. We really enjoyed listening to your story, and thanks everybody for watching the Bend and Sway show. And we'll be telling more stories just like this as time goes on. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Russ.